Joachim Kroll. The name itself barely registered. He was a face in the crowd if anyone even bothered to look. A man of simple tastes, simpler routines. He lived on the fringes, a quiet tenant in nondescript apartment buildings. His neighbors might offer a curt nod, a fleeting acknowledgement, nothing more. He was the kind of man you passed on the street and forgot instantly. His existence was a study in the mundane, a testament to the ordinary. This perceived harmlessness was his greatest weapon, a cloak of invisibility woven from societal indifference and his own carefully maintained, unassuming demeanor. He worked menial jobs, a toilet attendant, a sanitation worker, roles that kept him in the background, unseen, unheard. Kroll was not a man who drew attention. He sought no spotlight, craved no recognition beyond the basic necessities of life. The wolf was not just at the door, he was already inside, accepted as part of the flock, his true nature utterly concealed by the drabness of his disguise. Beneath this facade of normalcy lurked a horrifying secret. Joachim Kroll was not merely an odd, solitary figure. He was a predator of unimaginable cruelty. He was a serial killer. He was a cannibal. Known as the Ruhr Cannibal, his acts defied comprehension. The contrast between his appearance and reality was a chasm of depravity. His double life was a masterpiece of deception. By day, he was the quiet neighbor. By night, he transformed into a hunter. The streets and parks of the Ruhr Valley became his hunting grounds. He moved through the shadows, his true intentions hidden. The unmasking of Joachim Kroll was a brutal awakening. Joachim Kroll was born in Hindenburg, Upper Silesia, in 1933. His early life was steeped in hardship and deprivation. He was one of 9 children in a family struggling with poverty, a common plight in the turbulent years of pre-war and wartime Germany. His father was a miner, a harsh and demanding profession that likely left little room for paternal warmth or guidance. These formative years were characterized by scarcity, instability, and a distinct lack of emotional nourishment. Academically, Kroll struggled significantly. He was considered to have a low IQ, often described as simple-minded or slow-witted. This intellectual limitation likely contributed to his social isolation. He found it difficult to form meaningful connections with his peers, further deepening his sense of being an outsider. School was a place of failure and frustration, reinforcing a narrative of inadequacy. He left school with minimal education, equipped only for the most basic, unskilled labor. This lack of intellectual and social capital would define much of his adult life, pushing him further to the margins of society, where predators can often lurk unnoticed. The seeds of monstrosity were sown early. The year 1955 marked a horrifying turning point. Joachim Kroll committed his first known murder. The victim was Irmgard Strahl, a 19-year-old girl. She was raped and stabbed to death. This act of brutality was the terrifying overture to a symphony of violence that would span more than 2 decades. With this first kill, Kroll crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. He discovered a dark power, a means of asserting a grotesque form of dominance that his otherwise unremarkable life denied him. The monster within had tasted blood, and it would crave more, much more. Over the next 21 years, Kroll continued his reign of terror across the Ruhr Valley and surrounding areas. His victim count would eventually rise to at least 8, though authorities suspected him of several more, perhaps as many as 14. He preyed on women and children, those he perceived as vulnerable, easy targets for his depraved desires. The frequency of his attacks varied, sometimes with years passing between known murders, other times with a more rapid succession. This unpredictability made him an even more elusive and terrifying figure for both the public and the police struggling to connect the disparate crimes. Section 5. The Hunter's Modus Operandi, Deception in Plain Sight. Joachim Kroll was a patient and cunning hunter despite his intellectual limitations. He did not rely on elaborate schemes or sophisticated traps. Instead, his modus operandi was rooted in a chilling understanding of human vulnerability and the power of feigned helplessness. He often selected victims who were alone, perhaps in isolated areas like parks, lonely roads, or even near their own homes. He targeted young women, teenage girls, and sometimes even children. His choices reflected a predator's instinct for those less able to defend themselves, those more likely to be caught off guard by his seemingly benign approach. His methods of luring victims were deceptively simple. He might ask for directions, feign a minor injury, or offer unsolicited help with a task. Sometimes he would simply approach and engage in seemingly harmless conversation, disarming his targets with his non-threatening demeanor. He appeared as an ordinary, perhaps slightly awkward man. This was the core of his deception. He did not radiate menace. He radiated a kind of pitiable ordinariness that could evoke sympathy or, at the very least, a lack of immediate alarm. Section 6. The Depths of Depravity, Inside the Mind of a Cannibal. The act of murder for Joachim Kroll was often brutal and direct, with strangulation being a common method. This method provided him with a horrifying sense of control, a final physical dominance over his victims. He would watch the life drain from them, a chilling testament to his profound lack of empathy and his deep-seated rage. But for Kroll, death was not the end. It was merely a prelude to even more disturbing acts. His crimes transcended the act of killing itself, plunging into the darkest territories of human behavior, into acts of profound desecration that shocked even seasoned investigators. Following the murder, Kroll would frequently dismember his victims. This was not done with surgical precision, but rather with a crude, utilitarian approach. His purpose was twofold: to facilitate the disposal of remains and, more horrifyingly, to obtain portions of flesh for consumption. This cannibalistic urge is what set Kroll apart and cemented his infamous reputation. For more than 2 decades, Joachim Kroll eluded capture, becoming a phantom menace that haunted the Ruhr Valley. The police faced an incredibly frustrating and challenging investigation. In the early years of his crimes, forensic science was not as advanced as it is today. DNA technology was non-existent, and the collection and analysis of trace evidence were far more rudimentary. This meant that investigators often had little physical evidence to connect disparate crime scenes or to identify a suspect, especially one as adept at blending in as Kroll. He left few clues, and those he did leave were often insufficient to lead to a breakthrough. The sheer time span of his crimes also complicated matters. Kroll moved several times during his killing spree, committing offenses in different towns and jurisdictions. This geographical spread made it difficult for police forces, which were often more localized in their operations, to see the larger pattern. Cases that might have been linked were sometimes treated as isolated incidents. The lack of a centralized database for such crimes, combined with interdepartmental communication challenges, meant that crucial connections were missed for years. Kroll benefited from the systemic limitations of the time, slipping through the cracks of a fragmented investigative landscape. The end of Joachim Kroll's reign of terror did not come as a result of a brilliant piece of detective work or a sophisticated forensic breakthrough. Instead, it was a mundane, almost absurdly domestic problem that led to his unmasking. In July 1976, in the apartment building where Kroll resided in Friesenstrasse, Duisburg, a toilet pipe became severely clogged. This seemingly trivial incident would prove to be the catalyst that finally brought one of Germany's most prolific serial killers to justice. The blockage was not caused by ordinary waste, it was far more sinister. A fellow tenant, unable to clear the obstruction, called a plumber. When the plumber investigated the building's shared waste pipe, he made a horrifying discovery: human offal, small pieces of flesh and intestines. The nature of the blockage was immediately suspicious and deeply unsettling. The police were called to the scene, and the grim reality of what was clogging the pipes began to dawn on them. This was not an animal, this was human. The source of these remains had to be one of the tenants in the building. When investigators stepped across the threshold of Joachim Kroll's apartment, they entered a scene of unimaginable horror. The air itself was thick with the stench of decay and cooked meat, a nauseating aroma that hinted at the atrocities committed within those four walls. The dwelling was small, sparsely furnished, and disturbingly ordinary in its layout, yet it served as the lair of a monster. What they found inside would forever be seared into their memories, a testament to the depths of human depravity. This was not just a crime scene, it was a glimpse into a personal hell Kroll had created. The most immediate and shocking discoveries were the human remains. In the kitchen, officers found a cooking pot on the stove containing a stew made from human flesh. Other pieces of his latest victim, 4-year-old Marion Ketter, were found stored in the refrigerator, packaged as if they were common groceries. Small, severed hands were discovered, and other body parts were hidden in various locations throughout the small apartment. The chillingly domestic setting, a kitchen, a refrigerator used to store and prepare human remains, amplified the horror, blurring the lines between the mundane and the monstrous. The capture of Joachim Kroll sent shockwaves across Germany. The public, already unnerved by years of unsolved murders, was now confronted with the full extent of his depravity. The gruesome details of cannibalism and the number of victims were almost too much to bear. Newspapers and television broadcasts were filled with the chilling story. The case forced an uncomfortable reckoning with the idea that such a monster could exist undetected. For the communities in the Ruhr Valley, the impact was particularly acute. Families mourned their lost loved ones, their grief compounded by the horrific nature of the crimes. A pervasive sense of fear slowly began to recede, but it was replaced by a deep-seated unease. How had this man, their neighbor, managed to commit such atrocities without raising suspicion? The case led to soul-searching about community vigilance and the subtle signs that might have been missed. Kroll's trial in 1982 brought further disturbing details to light.